There is a conversation happening right now that you have never been taught to hear. It is not spoken in the language of markets or the grammar of economics. It is spoken in the language of consciousness. And once you learn to speak it fluently, you will discover that money is not something you chase. Money is something you call. I want you to sit with that for a moment. Not with your intellect, which will immediately wish to argue, but with that deeper part of you that already knows the truth before the words arrive. You have been told all your life that money is earned, that it is exchanged, that it flows to those who work hardest, plan longest, or were born luckiest. But I tell you, none of that is the first cause. None of that is where the story truly begins. The story begins in consciousness. It always has. It always will. Before anything appears in the world you can touch, it first appears in the world you cannot see. This is not poetry. This is the most practical statement ever made. Every building you have ever walked through was first a sustained imagining in someone's mind. Every fortune ever assembled was first a feeling, a specific, intimate, unashamed feeling, held quietly by one human being who dared to believe in what they could not yet see. And here is what I wish to tell you today. Here is the hidden thing I want to place into your hands like a burning coal that will illuminate everything around it. Money has a name, not a printed name on a piece of currency. I am speaking of something far more ancient and far more personal. Money has a name because all abundance is a state of consciousness. And every state of consciousness can be called the way you call a friend, the way you call a memory, the way you call the feeling of sunlight, by simply closing your eyes and remembering warmth. You do not need permission to do this. You do not need credentials, or a certain bloodline, or a particular education. You need only the willingness to speak, inwardly, deliberately, with total conviction, and the faith to wait upon what you have spoken. Think of how a name works. When a mother calls her child's name across a crowded room, something specific responds. Not everything in the room stirs, not the tables and chairs, not the strangers, only the one who belongs to that name. This is precisely how the inner life operates. When you call the name of wealth, not the desperate cry of the one who lacks, but the calm, assured call of the one who knows, something specific in the universe of your own consciousness responds. But most people never speak money's name that way. Most people speak of it in whispers of worry. They say its name in the dark hours with a tight chest and a contracted heart. They call it with the voice of someone who does not expect to be answered. And because the law of consciousness gives you exactly what your inner speech declares, they receive the equivalent of that voice. They receive the feeling of lack dressed in new circumstances, endlessly repeated. I am telling you to change your voice. Now I must show you something, because this is the turning point upon which everything depends, and I do not wish to leave you at the doorway without walking you through. Consciousness is not a mirror. I know the metaphor is common. I know people speak of the world as a reflection of your thoughts, and while it points in the right direction, it does not go far enough. Consciousness is not a passive surface that merely shows you back to yourself. Consciousness is a creative force. It is the only creative force there is. And what it creates with complete fidelity to the feeling that has been most deeply impressed upon it. This is why you must not simply think about money. Thinking about money while feeling poor is like planting a seed in concrete. The thought is there, the intention is there, but the feeling, the inner soil, is hardened against it. The seed cannot take root. What you must do, what I am inviting you to do right now, even as you hear these words, is to feel the feeling of wealth. Not imagine the objects it might bring. Not picture the house or the number in the account, but feel what it feels like to be a person for whom money moves freely, for whom abundance is not a hope but a habit, for whom the question is not, will it come, but simply, how shall I use it well? That feeling is a name. That feeling, held steadily, held lovingly, held without apology, is a call that must be answered. There is a story I want to share with you, not from any book, but from the interior landscape that all of us inhabit, that inner country where all transformation truly occurs. Imagine a man sitting in a room that feels small to him. Not because the walls are closed, but because his sense of himself is contracted. He thinks about money constantly. He calculates and recalculates. He watches what others have with an eye that measures the distance between their abundance and his lack. And in doing so, he makes that distance sacred. He enshrines it. He worships it without knowing it, because he gives it all his attention, all his inner speech, all his feeling. Now imagine the same man on a different evening. Something shifts. Perhaps it is a moment of exhaustion with the old story. Perhaps it is a sudden, inexplicable grace. But he grows still, and in that stillness, he allows himself, just for a moment, to feel what it would feel like to be free. Not victorious, not vindicated over others, simply free, at ease with money, comfortable with its presence, unafraid of its absence. He holds that feeling the way you hold a candle in a dark room, carefully, warmly, with full attention, and something in him that had been locked for years quietly opens. I am telling you that man is you, and the evening I am describing can be tonight. You may ask, and it is a fair question, how does this work? What is the mechanism? And I will answer you, though I ask you to hear the answer with your soul, and not only your mind. The world you see is the outpicturing of the world you are, not the world you wish you were, not the world you are trying to be. The world you are, right now, in the deep interior where no performance is possible and no pretending survives. What lives there, what truly dwells there, as a felt assumption about yourself and about life, that is what becomes your outer experience. Not eventually, not approximately, precisely and inevitably. So when I say speak to money by name, I mean go to that interior place. Go there not with begging and not with demanding, but with the quiet authority of someone who understands the law. And from that place, declare, not to the world outside, but to the self within, declare that you are someone for whom abundance is natural. Declare it as a fact. Let it rest in you as a settled thing. The outer world, which has no choice but to conform to the inner, will begin to rearrange itself around that declaration. Doors will open that you did not know existed. People will appear who carry precisely what you need. Opportunities will surface from directions you were not watching. None of this is magic in the superstitious sense. It is all the natural, inevitable consequence of consciousness clothing itself in form. I want to speak now about something that is perhaps the most important thing I will say today, the thing that separates those who understand this teaching from those who merely admire it. You must not love money. You must love what money represents in your consciousness. And what does it represent? Think carefully. Strip away the vanity, the comparison, the compensation for old wounds. What remains? Freedom, security, the capacity to give, the ability to move through life without the grinding weight of material fear. The simple, profound dignity of a life in which your needs are met and your generosity can flow. When you fall in love with that, not with the numbers, not with the status, not with the power over others, but with the feeling of living freely and giving freely, when that becomes the name you call, then what comes to you carries the qualities of what you love. It comes as freedom. It comes as security. It comes with elegance rather than anxiety. But if what you truly love, beneath all the wanting, is the feeling of winning over someone else, of proving your worth by another's measure, then what comes will carry that feeling. And it will require constant feeding. It will never be enough. Because you have spoken the wrong name, and what you have called is a hunger that cannot be filled. Speak the right name. Speak it purely. Speak it from the place in you that is already whole. You were never meant to struggle for the substance of life. I know that runs against everything you have been taught. I know the voice of your conditioning is rising right now to remind you of practical realities, of hard work, of how the world actually operates. And I am not dismissing the outer world. I am not telling you to sit still and wait for gold to fall from the sky. What I am telling you is that the outer effort, the work, the planning, the execution flows differently, moves more powerfully, and arrives at better destinations when it is animated by the right inner state. The person who acts from a consciousness of abundance moves through the same world as the person who acts from scarcity, but they do not meet the same world. They cannot, because what each of them encounters is a reflection of what each of them is. Do the work, but do it as the person you have already become on the inside. Walk into the room as someone who knows. Make the call as someone who expects. Write the proposal as someone who has already received. Let your actions be the behavior of your new self, not the desperate motions of your old one. This is the secret. This is the art. The inner state is not the reward that comes after the outer success. The inner state is the cause from which all outer success proceeds. And so we come to this. The name you call money by is the name you have given yourself. If you call it scarce, you have named yourself unworthy. If you call it impossible, you have named yourself powerless. If you call it someone else's, you have named yourself separate from the whole. But if you call it present, if you call it flowing, if you call it natural, if you call it mine, not from greed, but from the deep recognition that you are a child of an infinite source, and that source withholds nothing from a consciousness ready to receive, then you have spoken truly. And what is spoken truly in the depths of the self must appear in the world of form. It is law. It is as certain as the law that makes the seed become the tree. Speak that name tonight, not loudly, not with effort. The way you say the name of someone you trust completely, the way you speak of something that is already yours. Because it is. I leave you with this, and I leave you with it, because it is the one thing that, once truly received, changes everything. You have never been separated from abundance. The illusion of separation is the only poverty that has ever existed. Beneath the circumstances, beneath the patterns, beneath the long story of not enough, there is a self in you that has never lacked anything. A self that is, in its essence, the very presence from which all things emerge. When you touch that self, when you rest there, even briefly, even for the length of one deep breath, you are touching the source from which all abundance flows. You are standing in the field before the harvest. You are holding the name before it is spoken. You are the cause before the effect. Speak from there, call from there, live from there, and watch with the quiet awe of someone who has always known this was possible, as the world that was built around lack quietly dissolves, and the world that belongs to your new name begins to rise. The name has always been yours. You had only to speak it. There is a voice you have been taught to ignore. It is not loud. It does not arrive with thunder or spectacle. It comes softly, like a door opening in a quiet house, like a candle being lit in a room you thought was empty. And yet this voice is the beginning of every change that has ever touched your life. I am speaking of the moment you stop treating money as something distant, mechanical, and different to you, and begin to address it as though it were already aware of your presence. For money is not merely paper, nor figures upon a screen, nor the cold arithmetic of a bank account. Money, in the world of experience, behaves like an obedient servant to your inner assumption. It takes form according to the state you occupy. It flows where it is invited. It lingers where it is expected. It withdraws where it is feared. And so the first secret is not how to chase money, but how to speak to it from the place within you where creation begins. You have been trained to look at the visible and call it truth. You have been taught to inspect the outer world and then react to it as though it were the master of your destiny. But I tell you, the outer world is only the echo. It is only the shadow cast by a deeper movement within you. What you assume in silence, what you accept in feeling, what you habitually declare to be true of yourself, that is the seed from which all conditions rise. If you speak to money as a stranger, it remains a stranger. If you speak to money as a burden, it becomes a burden. If you speak to money as though it is always slipping away, it will reveal itself to you in the language of loss. But if you speak to it as one who knows its name, as one who understands its place in the divine order of your life, then you will discover something astonishing. It begins to move in harmony with your inner speech. Do you see what this means? It means that before money can obey your hands, it must first be instructed by your consciousness. This is why so many labor endlessly and remain poor in spirit, for they are not merely working with their hands. They are working against their own assumptions. They earn, they spend, they worry, they strive, and beneath all of it there is a hidden conversation that says, there is not enough. It is difficult. It is for others, but not for me. I must struggle to deserve it. And life, always faithful, reflects that inner confession with astonishing precision. But the moment you begin to speak differently, not with mere words, but with conviction, the whole atmosphere changes. To speak to money by name is not to flatter it. It is to acknowledge it as a living expression of supply, as a current of circulation, as a force that answers to consciousness. You are not begging, you are not pleading, you are not trembling before a master outside yourself. You are assuming your rightful place as the one who directs the inner climate from which outer conditions arise. When you say, inwardly and with feeling, money comes to me easily, you are not making a wish. When you say, money knows my name, you are not indulging fantasy. When you say, I am receptive to wealth, you are not pretending. You are planting a consciousness. And consciousness always becomes fact. There is something majestic about this truth once it is seen. You begin to understand that the question was never whether money could reach you. The question was always whether you could remain faithful to the state that allows it to approach. For there are inner doors, and they open only to the key of assumption. There are invisible chambers within the soul, and in those chambers lie the conditions of your life waiting to be awakened. A man may stand before a locked chest for years, calling it impossible, while the key has always been in his hand. You have the key now, and that key is not force. It is not anxiety. It is not desperate repetition. It is feeling. Feeling is the secret language of creation. Feeling is the seal upon the word. Feeling is what causes the unseen to become visible. When you speak to money with feeling, not with greed, not with tension, not with hunger, but with calm certainty, you enter a relationship with abundance that cannot be shaken by appearances. Picture a great river. It does not ask the stones whether it may pass. It does not negotiate with the bank. It simply flows, because flowing is its nature. So it is with supply when you cease resisting it. So it is with provision when you stop declaring yourself separate from it. The river does not need persuasion. It needs a channel. And your consciousness is the channel through which abundance enters form. Yet here is the deeper truth, the one most people never stay still enough to hear. You do not attract money by worshipping money. You attract money by becoming the inner person who naturally lives in agreement with wealth. That is the turning point. For there is a vast difference between desiring wealth and inhabiting the state of being one to whom wealth belongs. Desire reaches outward and remains incomplete. State is inward and complete. Desire says, I hope. State says, I am. Desire trembles before delay. State rests in fulfillment. Desire looks at the future. State feels the possession now. And when you enter the state, the world begins to reorganize itself around you. This is why speaking to money by name is so powerful. Not because money has ears like a man, but because your words reveal your state. And when your words are united with feeling, they cease to be sounds and become creative acts. There are those who say abundance is random. There are those who say success is reserved for the lucky, the favored, the already established. But I say to you, the world is more obedient than you have imagined. It is not rebellious. It is responsive. It is not cruel. It is exact. It mirrors what you occupy inwardly, and it does so with relentless fidelity. Then why should you continue to speak from lack? Why should you continue to call money scarce, difficult, distant, and unreliable? Why should you rehearse deprivation as though it were wisdom? Why should you bow before absence when presence is already waiting to be acknowledged? There comes a moment in every soul's awakening when it ceases to ask the world for permission. It begins instead to speak from within the end. It says, I know who I am now. It says, I am not abandoned. It says, supply is not outside me, waiting to be earned by suffering. It says, I live in a generous universe, and I belong to its generosity. And when this is felt deeply enough, everything changes. You may still see the old conditions for a time. Do not be disturbed by them. The visible lags behind the invisible. The seed does not reveal the forest in the moment it is planted, yet the forest is already contained within it. So too your new assumption carries its fulfillment within itself. Be patient with the unfolding. Remain loyal to the feeling. The visible will eventually obey the invisible command. This is where faith becomes more than belief. Faith is not hoping something will happen. Faith is dwelling in the consciousness of its already being. To speak to money by name is to say, I know you, I recognize your movement, I welcome your arrival. I no longer fear your absence because I have become inwardly aligned with your presence. That is not arrogance. That is understanding. And understand this carefully. You are never speaking only to money. You are speaking to the totality of your own life. Money is simply one of the clearest mirrors through which your assumptions are revealed. Change your relation to money, and you will discover that you have also changed your relation to worth, to security, to possibility, to self-trust, to life itself. For a man who believes he is worthy begins to stand differently. A woman who knows she is supplied begins to breathe differently. A soul that feels abundance becomes less frantic, less grasping, less divided within itself. And that inner peace is not the reward of wealth. It is often the soil from which wealth springs. So speak gently, speak consistently, speak with a calm authority that does not need to shout. When you wake, let your first word be expectancy. When you walk, let your inner atmosphere be open. When you see your account, do not bow before fear. Bow before truth. And the truth is this: you are not at the mercy of appearances. You are the one in whom appearances are born. Let your inner speech become a sanctuary. Money finds me easily. Money responds to me. Money comes in expected and unexpected ways. Money obeys the state I occupy. I am already the one who has what he needs. Do not say these things as empty formula. Say them as one who is laying a foundation in the unseen. Say them until they cease to sound like words and begin to feel like home. Then watch, not with strain but with quiet certainty, not with anxiety but with reverence, not as one checking for proof, but as one who knows that the seed never fails. For there is a law deeper than circumstance, and that law is this: the world conforms to consciousness. The unseen becomes seen. The inward becomes outward. The spoken with feeling becomes lived reality. And when you truly understand this, you no longer chase money as though it were a fugitive. You command your inner state. You bless supply in consciousness. You speak to money by name. And in time, in ways larger and more graceful than you could have arranged, it answers. Not because you forced it, not because you begged it, but because you finally became the one it was always seeking to meet. Remain there then. Stay in that feeling. Let that be your dwelling place. For when you do, money does not merely come. It obeys.